At the time this happened, I was 13, female. So this happened 2 years ago, and I was fairly naive. I was a major introvert, only friends with a few people in my class. I wanted to be social, but I preferred to be alone and read and write. Classic nerd things. In early November, I got a text on my phone that was from a few classmates whose numbers I had, and around one or two I couldn't recognize. It was a group chat asking if we wanted to hang out at night near the park at our school. My parents, being strict and paranoid, would never let me go. Luckily, or what I thought was luck, they were heading out for an overnight trip. They would be back around 4 in the morning. Everything fell into place. Once my parents left around 8ish, I ran out the door and made my way to the park. The one thing I made sure was to lock the door. My parents were paranoid after all, and it was their biggest thing that they engraved into me. Once I arrived at the park, I noticed a creepy figure near the edge of the woods. No one else seemed to notice it, and I had already had enough reputation as the weirdo who was true crime obsessed. I didn't mention it. The night drew on and on. I was having the time of my life, ignoring the gut feeling that kept telling me to run. Every so often I would look over my shoulder and the man would be still standing there. Around 9:45, 4 out of the 10 people had to leave due to their curfew. It was getting cold and it was nearly pitch black with a few streetlights every so often. The rest of us decided to go as well, since it felt more eerie and quiet. The place we were hanging out was at a field that was fenced in within a few exits and entrances. A large wide field with a small park in the back and our giant middle school behind us. The front of the field faced the empty road, and the right and the left sides were surrounded by forest. All of the people left were getting picked up by cars, meaning that they went the opposite way of the road, since that's where the parking lot was. The man stood right by the forest or the road exit that I needed to take to go home. I walked away from my group and tried to steady my heavy breathing. I didn't want to be paranoid, but all the true crime I listened to was catching up to me. That man was probably early 40s, late 30s, dark hair with a beard, and he was probably around 5'9", but at the same time it seemed like 6 foot. He stood about 10 feet from the exit I had to take, so when I got close enough, I ran for about 30 feet through the exit and through the woods. Once I felt safe enough, I started just to quickly walk through the woods, or at least to get to the road. I heard a snap and a crunch from behind me. I stopped walking for a second and quickly checked over my shoulder. Around 15 feet behind me stood the very same man. He was walking slowly behind me, almost as if he were trying not to be suspicious, but it only made my fear worse. I turned around and walked so quickly I was basically jogging. I lived about 10 minutes away from the park where we had hung out, and I wasn't athletic enough to run home. After around 7 minutes of walking fast, I was in my neighborhood. I knew I could run to my house if I had to, so I checked to see if he was still trailing behind me. To my horror, he was only about 5 feet away. I ran. I ran faster than I've ever ran. I could hear his footsteps behind me thumping across the concrete as he ran too. I dove down an alleyway I knew well and tried to lose him in the park, making my way home longer. I could hear his heavy breath followed by his footsteps as he tried to keep up. I cut through houses, backyards, and front yards. I finally made it to my house and flew up the steps. I looked behind me, and he had just arrived at the bottom of my stairs. I unlocked the door and burst through it, shoving it closed behind me, and I heard him hit the door with his whole body. I ran around the house and locked all the windows, turned off all the lights, and hid in my bedroom with a kitchen knife just in case he got in. He didn't, luckily. If this was a better world, that's where my story would end, but it doesn't. After a few months, I haven't really told anyone what's been happening since I don't want to get in trouble with my parents for sneaking out or anything. I didn't go out with anyone or any group anymore, and my loner status returned. I began to write horror stories as a coping mechanism and never went out past 7 p.m. It was around February when a classmate of mine was sharing a story of some random man following her home on the bus. She described him almost the exact same as the man who had chased me home. Another girl mentioned that he sounded like the guy who stood outside the school and tried to follow her home. I didn't join in, but everyone agreed that it was just some weird guy. He was kind of forgotten and eventually moved on too. Around May, I was getting ready to walk to school when my mom pulled me aside and showed me a picture of a man. The guy who stalked me, actually. She told me that he had been taken into custody 2 weeks ago for sexually assaulting a child and had escaped last night. She told me to keep an eye out for him and call the cops if I saw him. I was shaking the whole time I walked to school. It haunts me to know that if he had caught me, I would have likely been in her position or even dead. So creepy nighttime stalker who liked to hunt down young girls and sexually assault them, let's not meet again. For context, I'm in school still and work for a family member on certain weekends at a local college selling concessions at the stadium. It's about twice a month, and the stadium is off towards the edge of town. It's Friday night. I had just gotten out of school and had to go straight to work. I get to work for 4 hours, which was about half a shift that night, and my boss, who was my aunt, tells me we need more spoons for tomorrow's event. We sell ice cream, and these events have like 5,000 plus people at them. So I say, okay, I'll go grab them on my way home. The only store open with heavy-duty spoons is all the way on the other side of town, and I still wanted to go meet up with some friends and mess around. I decided to take the faster but more sketchy way around the outskirts of town. I lived in a weather bipolar state. It snowed last night, but figured the roads would be fine enough even if they weren't plowed. I take off to the store, and the first 5 minutes go by and nothing's wrong. I haven't seen a single car or any buildings the entire time, but keep in mind it's approaching 9 p.m., and I'm on the outskirts of town, and no one really takes this way unless they have to. All of a sudden, I see something in the corner of my eye, and it looks like a man. Roughly 5'8", I'd say, wearing shorts, t-shirt, and a backwards hat. He's in a ditch, walking in the snow when it's about 10 degrees out. My first thought was to pull over, but I'm on the phone with my mom at the time, and she warns me not to, as some things have happened before in this town. For example, a couple of years ago, there was a college girl who was kidnapped and found dead, rolled up in a rug in 2014. I considered stopping, but for some reason I tell myself not to. I wasn't really worried about anything, and I'm a young dude driving a big pickup. Last type of person anyone would want to harm, right? I passed the man going about 40 miles an hour. Like I said, the roads aren't the best. I drive not even 500 feet past him, and immediately, a car that I did not see at all before turns on and pulls out of the field entrance off to the road and starts following me. At first I thought I was just focused on the man in the ditch and didn't see the road, and that's where they came from, but later found out there was not a road there at all. Now again, I'm not super worried. I've watched my fair share of crime movies and read plenty of stories on this sub and didn't feel it was really a threat yet. I start to approach the town again and have to take some turns to get where I'm going. I turn left, the car turns left. I turn right, the car turns right. I go around a roundabout and skip my turn and go twice as no one else was there, car follows. At this point I start to worry a little, but maybe they just need to go to the store also. I then pull up to a stop sign. I wasn't on the best side of town either, may I add, and I turn without my signal. The car follows. Now at this point, I should have went straight to the police station, but I didn't think much of it. I'm 2 miles from the store where plenty of people will be. I take a few more turns and the car continues to follow me. I completely blew a stop sign at a non-busy intersection and the car does a quick stop and go and catches up. At this point, I'm 2 turns until the store, so I'm not really that worried anymore. I turn into the store and the car turns also. The store also has a gas station, so I pull in first to act like I was getting gas. The car sits off to the side of the road, in between the gas station and store, and just sits there. I wait about 10 minutes and the car doesn't move. At this point, I started to get worried. I'm a young kid alone at night near the bad side of town. I call my friends that I'm supposed to meet up with later on, and give them the license plate for worst case scenario, then take off to the store. I cross the street and the car comes straight behind me. I'm freaking out on the phone, not knowing if I should call the cops or not. I go and park as close as possible to the store, and the car parks about 3 rows behind me and a couple down. It's getting late at this point, and the store's closing soon, so there's only a few others in the parking lot. I turn my truck back on and go park across the parking lot, get out, and bolt inside the store. I'm not super overweight, but I'm not skinny either. I'm about 6'1" and 200 pounds. Who would want anything to do with me? I go to call my friends to walk back outside and my phone is dead. I look out the sliding doors and suddenly there's a white van next to the driver's side. Looks like no one's in it, but the back windows are covered and it's running. Big red flag. I run to customer service and explain everything, but they just think I'm just some young kid messing around. At the time, I didn't see the original car follow, but no way in hell I'm going outside with that van next to my truck. After waiting for what seemed like hours, which was really in reality about 30 minutes, the van pulls forward and the original car appears from the side of the building. I could see them talking near a window, but it looked like they both drove off. I wait another 10 minutes and dash outside. I speed to my friend's house, and when I get there, I park in his garage. My one buddy asks me why there's a big orange mark on my tire, and my heart sinks. When I was inside, the other car must have marked my tire. After inspecting the rest of the truck, we find a small pipe dropped in the bed of my truck, surrounded by snow. It was about 2 inches wide, and I'd say about maybe 18 inches long, wrapped in duct tape. It was obviously not mine. I was alone, no phone, scared, in a part of town I'm not familiar with. So I tried to laugh it off, but now that everyone's asleep, I can't help but to think about what would have happened if I would have walked back outside. I've always been sort of ego boosted on the fact that I'm a chubby dude that no one would probably want to mess with, but after tonight, I realize anyone can be targeted. So, creepy men who followed me all night and waited by my truck, let's not meet again. Update. The police came and took the pipe today, as multiple of you said, and I knew already they can't really do anything because nothing really happened. They said that they'll look into the license plate, but other than that, they can't really do too much because no crimes were committed. A little bit of background. I'm 23 female, but was 20 at the time. I moved in with my uncle in San Antonio, Texas, with the agreement that I didn't have to pay rent as long as I helped him out with chores and my cousins. I got a job at a super well-known coffee chain downtown close to the touristy part of the area. We had a lot of regulars and a lot of homeless coming in and out. I felt relatively safe though, because I got to know the people there, and it was almost always a lot of foot traffic. I used to even take walks after work in the area, especially since I was super close to the Riverwalk. Skip a couple months into the job, and I was friends with everybody I worked with. We were all super close. On this day in particular, it was one of my coworkers' last day. There was about 3 guys who had been here almost all morning. They hadn't bought anything and were just hanging around, which was not unusual for my location. On my break, I decided to take a walk down to the nearby drugstore so I can get some farewell cards and maybe a small gift for the coworker. I walked out and put my earphones in, and before I could press play, I hear the door open behind me and footsteps following behind. Whoever it was caught up to me and started walking beside me, matching my pace. I turned to look, and it was one of the guys that had been there all morning. He was a bit taller than me and reminded me of a lot of Lakeith Stanfield. He tried to ask me for my number, and I kindly told him no. He persisted, and I, with a short temper, told him to fuck off. He stopped and stared at me in surprise, as I don't look like someone who speaks up or would be rude. He stood there as I walked away, and by the time I went back, they were gone. I proceeded to tell my coworkers about the encounter, and we laughed it off. I thought that'd be the end of it. I was wrong. Every shift after that, he would already be there just hanging out or would walk in mid-shift, sometimes with somebody else and sometimes by himself. I assumed he was just another homeless person because how else would he always be able to be around? My shifts were sporadic. Some days I opened, some days I closed, I worked mid, but it didn't matter, he was always there. At that point, I started feeling paranoid. I would always catch him staring in my direction. He never ordered anything, never talked to me, and luckily wouldn't follow me. He just would sit there, watching me. I started mentioning this to my coworkers, and they started noticing it too. One of my team leaders would help me out by sending me to wash dishes in the back or organize the cooler. My coworkers would also try and place themselves to try and block me from his view. I started feeling uncomfortable at work. Sometimes when I closed, a coworker would walk me to my car before heading home themselves. Or if I didn't close, they would walk me to my car and turn around and head back to work. Then one day of him just staring, I was working the register that day. He walked up and ordered a water. I asked for the name of the order. I now had his first name just in case. He took his water and sat down. I had mentioned him before to my manager, but because he hadn't really done anything, we couldn't do anything besides note it to the manager book. The next day I worked with my manager. It was him, 2 other coworkers, and me. I told them I had to go to the bathroom real quick. There were 2 bathrooms right next to each other, but sort of hidden from the coffee bar and register, and they weren't gender specific. I walked around the bar to the lobby area. I had to pass his table and walk down to the lobby to get to the bathrooms. I noticed him getting up before I was going inside the bathroom. I sat down to do my business when someone rattled the knob. I shouted out that it was occupied, but whoever it was just kept rattling it until I finished. When I opened the door, no one was there, and walking back, I noticed him adjusting back into his chair. I was super freaked out and told my boss. He couldn't tell him anything because we had no proof it was him. Later that shift, he got up and picked up a coffee from the pickup area. My boss assumed he had ordered it and let him take it. I told him it wasn't, and it wasn't even his name. My boss used this opportunity to tell him if he does something like that again, he can't come back. The man apologized and actually stuck to the rules every day after that. He went back to just watching me. Cut to Valentine's Day, one of the team leaders and I would be scheduled to work certain Thursdays after close to do a deep clean of the store. We would stay until 1 a.m. This was one of those Thursdays. We were almost done and I had to clean the bathrooms as one of the last chores. I finished, and as I walk out of the bathroom, I see him peeking in with both his hands pressed to the window, eyes wide, just staring at me with this super intense look. I froze for a second, just staring back. I noticed on one of his palms that is pressed to the window, a purple foam heart. He doesn't move at all. I freak out and Steve back in the bathroom. I shout, "Hannah! Hannah! He's back! He's here!" She barely hears me through the music we were blasting. Hannah was the team lead who would help me hide from him, so she knew who he was. She walks towards the bathroom shouting, "What are you saying? What's going on?" As soon as she gets close, she sees him. I told her again, "He's here. He's watching me." She started shouting through the window, "You need to leave. If you don't leave, we're calling the police." I step out a little to see if he'll leave, and he's ignoring her and his eyes were fixated in my direction. I step back into the bathroom and my lead continues to shout at him to leave and threatens him with the police. After 5 minutes pass and he realizes that I'm not stepping out until he leaves, he does so. The next day, me and my lead went up to the manager and told him all about what happened. Told him that I wanted to file a police report. He tells me no, to wait until he talks to his boss. He shows up again that day, but I was only there to talk to my manager and leave right after. When I got home, a friend convinced me to call the cops. So I text my boss that I don't care what he or his boss says because I'm scared and I'm going to file a report. I dial 911 and tell them the summarized version. They tell me they're going to send someone to where I live to take an official report. The 2 officers were so nice and supportive. I told them my whole story and how my boss didn't feel the need to go to the cops and get them involved since I wasn't harmed. The officers told me I should have called right away and defend me, saying they can get him for harassment. I thank them and they tell me that if he shows up again, dial 911 so they can take him in for trespassing and harassing. I think that my day manager banned him and warned him because he never showed up to the coffee shop again. A few months later, when I was comfortable again with downtown, I went out with some friends to walk around. We were close to where I worked, and as I round around the corner, I see him. And so I ducked into the little corner store and my friends follow. I told them I saw him and to keep an eye out. Once he was out of view, we left the store, and that was the last time I saw him. So, creepy coffee shop stalker, let's not meet again.